In many states, you cannot marry your your relatives or this or anything like that, or your siblings, whatever. But if you are above a certain age, then you can, for example, make a marriage that would be biologically considered incest. So, which means if you can't bear children anymore, then you can do it. I'm fine with it. Why not? I mean, what do you think about cousin marriage?
Cousin marriage. Just make sure you don't have kids.
Yeah.
I go beyond cousin marriage. I don't think there's anything wrong with incest.
What?
Yeah, what's wrong with incest? What's wrong? What's wrong with it? Tell me. I challenge you.
There have been researches made on it, and it has consequences. It has bad health consequences, like
for the kids, right? If there's two sisters, they can't have kids.
So okay. Sorry, I missed that part. Yes, right.
Okay, so if two sisters or if two brothers have incest sexual relationship, there's nothing. I can't see anything wrong with it, right?
Well, there is actually nothing wrong with it. Yeah,
there's nothing wrong with it, right? Yeah. And also, if they're straight, if a brother and sister, if they absolutely make sure that they don't have kids, then there's also nothing wrong with it.
Well, yeah.
I see these are taboo stuff that people are like, what
Don't
the
challenge
fuck?
me.
I challenge you. Tell me what's wrong with it. I can't think of anything why people are like, oh, it's gross. Well, then don't do it.
Yeah, objectively, there is nothing wrong with it. Let's make it clear.
You say the same about animals? Was that the same answer to both?
I mean, as long as you're not hurting the animal. I'm also in favor of animal rights. And again, I mean, excuse me for going over time, but since you are adding to the question here, the question here I mean, you can argue based on principle, but you can also argue, as Mr. Hijab has done, based on empirical realities. And then the question becomes, how many people does this involve? What is the problem here? How large is the problem? Why should we have laws against something that, I mean, a very small minority? And I would like to see the statistics on how many Norwegians are traveling to Denmark to have sex with animals. And what animals, by the way? I mean, this becomes sort of absurd discussion.
Thank you. So I will take one question to...
Why is incest wrong?
It's not clear to me that it's wrong.
Okay.
It's clear to me. There's an evolution. No. Listen to me. Listen to me.
Wait. Let's give him the respect, please. He's got a justification.
You asked me a question, and if you want me to answer, I will.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Do it. Okay. The point is, most societies have a taboo on incest, and it's an empirical one. Generally, incest produces genetic defects.
Yes.
Okay. And so in general, there's a physiological reason and a societal one why incest is wrong.
Yes.
Okay? But if you ask me the question, is it, and this is an interesting question, by the way, there's an ingrained incest taboo in almost all societies for that reason.
Sure.
Because societies want to persist, so it works. But if you ask me a priori, for example, the question, if a brother and a sister loved each other and used contraception, is there something absolutely morally wrong about that? And that, by the way, and it was once, and they went off and it didn't affect anything else, I'd have to think about it, because I don't think there's any absolute condemnation of that fact. If they love each other and care for each other and they go off and it doesn't affect anything else,
okay.
Would I recommend it? No. Would I be particularly happy about it? But would I be willing to listen to those arguments if they were rational? Maybe.
Okay, good. So, see, this is precisely the point I'm trying to make, Professor Krauss, is that I find it quite interesting.
Welcome to Muslim Apologetics Australia. In this video, we're going to see the irrationality of these ex-Muslims who claim they've left Islam because Islam is an irrational religion. Yet when I went to an ex-Muslim on Facebook to question him on his atheistic worldview, because he claims he's left Islam because it's irrational, doesn't make sense. He then goes to atheism. So I questioned him on his atheistic worldview, about some of the issues that I find controversial and illogical upon the subject of morality. And I had this ex-Muslim named Abdullah Gondal, who actually had no issue if hypothetically one day that if he had sexual desires for his own daughter and she had sexual desires for him and there was consent involved, then he would allow his daughter to actually suck his genitals. And he agreed to that. He said there's basically, it's not wrong in the atheist worldview, and he agreed to it. And I'll show you the screenshots. Have a look. And before I display the screenshots, I want to also remind you that I got permission from Abdullah Gondal to post these private messages. As you can see in the screen here, I wrote to Abdullah Gondal on his Facebook. I said to him, do you give permission to post around your private messages to me? It seems you're posting a lot of my messages around. And Abdullah then says that he mentions about him posting some of my comments. And I said, sure, no problem. I said, you can post them. I said, do you mind if I post your private messages you sent to me about incest and bestiality and make them public? And he said, I already said, please make a video about it all. And I said, thank you. So I got his consent just in case some of the Abdullah Gondal followers are pretty annoyed about this and want to shut down this video. So I did get permission of Abdullah Gondal to post our private exchange. So I asked Abdullah Gondal, I said, so answer me, according to your atheist worldview, would you support anyone having sex with a donkey if the animal shows signs of sexual behavioral consent? Now, at first glimpse, Abdullah says, what? No? As you can see in the comment, he goes, what? No? So he's basically saying no. But then I asked him, so I pressed him a bit. I said, please explain why no? Because as you know, if things are done in consent, then an atheist really can't say no to this freedom. So then Abdullah writes back and he says, I was going to bring up consent, but now that I think of it, I got to read up on philosophical arguments. Abdullah then goes on to say, because we are all animals and interspecies sex is naturally observed. Did you hear that? He goes on to say, I'd say it's nothing productive at all. As long as the animal and you aren't being harmed, it's fine. How do you define the animal is consenting is a key, like humping motion. Well, yes, there's actually a video on YouTube where it shows a donkey running in a field trying to hump a man. So I guess Abdullah now agrees that if the donkey shows a humping motion, then the animal is consenting. He then goes on to say, but apart from our social bias against it, I don't really see anything wrong with it. So there you have it, folks. Abdullah goes from the irrationality of Islam to apparently the rationality of the atheist worldview, where he is condoning sex with a donkey. And he says there's nothing really wrong with it. And this is a really interesting thing. Abdullah Gondal, the ex-Muslim, he goes on to say, quote, I always find it curious that atheism is merely a lack of belief in God. It isn't a moral position, so why drag atheism into morality? But I guess you want to argue for God using the moral argument, so I see where you're coming from. But thanks for bringing bestiality up. He says, now that I think of it, it's interesting. I'll read up on philosophers' arguments about it. So I then said to Abdullah, so you don't think it's wrong to have sex with a donkey? Okay, thank you for your honesty then. And Abdullah writes back and says, as long as the donkey, he's accidentally wrote money, but he means donkey. He says, as long as the donkey and you are not being harmed and both sides are consenting, he says, I'll get back to you though. So basically he's a bit troubled. He wants to go read other philosophical arguments about it. But up until this point, he concedes to agreeing to sex with a donkey. So there you have it, folks. That is Atheism 101. You go from the irrationality apparently of Islam to the rationality of atheism that permits one to go and have sexual entertainment with animals. This is the perversion of atheism. Now, folks, if you thought that was crazy, it's even getting more creepy and more crazy. This ex-Muslim, Abdullah Gondal, believes that you can actually engage in sexual relationships with your own daughter according to the atheist worldview. So I asked him a question and I said to Abdullah, so Abdullah Gondal, can I get one last confirmation according to your atheist moral worldview? If hypothetically speaking, one day you had sexual feelings towards your own biological daughter and she had sexual feelings towards you, and you asked her for her consent to give you a blowjob, would you let her suck your genitals? Abdullah Gondal replies back and says, yes, buddy. Look at that. He says, yes, buddy.